Imagine walking across the same graduation stage as your sister, wearing the same gown, flashing the same camera-ready smile. But behind mine was a glacier of cold, hard resolve. My parents paid every cent of my sister Haley's tuition, but when I asked for help, my mother looked me dead in the eye and said, "She deserved it, but you didn't." So I worked nights to pay my own way. And when my name was called on graduation day, their proud smiles didn't just fade. They shattered in front of everyone. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and please do not forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones. Haley and I were twins, but that never meant equal. She was the soft one, the favorite, the angel. I was the dependable one, the one who never needed help, or so they said. Growing up, our parents' love had a pattern. She was celebrated, I was compared. When she got into college, they paid every bill without a blink. When I did, they suddenly discovered budget issues. I remember that night vividly. I had called home, exhausted from juggling school and 2 part-time jobs, just to ask for a little help with tuition. My mother's voice was calm, almost casual when she said it. "Haley deserved it. But you didn't." There was no anger in her tone, no guilt either. Just finality. It was the kind of sentence that doesn't end a conversation. It ends a relationship. After that, something inside me changed. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just stopped waiting for their approval. I packed my pride, my books, and what little hope I had left, and moved into a shoebox apartment near campus. Every day was a test of endurance, classes, then work, then another shift. I learned how to live on instant noodles and ambition. Meanwhile, Haley posted her perfect college life online. Frat parties, spring break trips, selfies with our parents at fancy restaurants. I scrolled past each one, not out of jealousy but clarity. I finally saw the truth. They didn't see me as less loved. They saw me as less needing to be loved. But they were wrong. I needed it. I just learned to replace it with something stronger. Determination. And as graduation drew closer, something unexpected began to shift. People who had ignored me started noticing. Professors who barely remembered my name began to ask about my work. A few doors started opening, quietly but surely. I never told my family. Not yet. I wanted them to find out the same way they found out everything else about me. Too late. So when the day finally came and I walked across that stage, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was calm, because I knew something they didn't. Something that would make their smiles freeze before the applause even stopped. But I'll tell you about that part later. The apartment I moved into was barely a step above a storage room. The walls were thin, the pipes moaned at night, and the heater worked only when it wanted to. Still, it was mine. I didn't have anyone to rely on, so I made peace with it. I'd come home after midnight from my library shift, set my alarm for dawn, and try to rest for a few hours before class. Sleep became something I borrowed, not something I owned. Haley, on the other hand, lived like she had stepped into a college brochure. Her dorm was bright, filled with expensive decor and gifts our parents had sent. I'd see her photos online, smiling with her sorority friends, brunching on weekends, talking about how stressful college life was. It was strange how 2 sisters could live such different lives only a few miles apart. Sometimes she'd call, usually when she needed to show off something new. "You should try to manage your time better," she'd say in that sweet, patronizing tone. "You're always working. You need to live a little." I would smile through the phone, even though I wanted to hang up. Living a little wasn't an option for me. Surviving was the only plan I could afford. At the library, I spent long nights shelving books, wiping dust from tables, and scanning overdue returns. The quiet should have been comforting, but it only gave me space to think. Every time I handled another student's returned textbook or saw a group studying together, I wondered how different things might have been if my parents had believed I deserved the same start as Haley. Then I'd push the thought away. Thinking didn't change rent or tuition. Money was always tight. I learned to stretch $1 until it nearly tore. Instant noodles, secondhand clothes, and free campus events became my routine. But slowly, I started to feel something shift inside me. The less I depended on others, the stronger I felt. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was proving something, even if no one noticed yet. There were moments, though, when loneliness hit hard, especially on weekends, when the apartment was too quiet. I'd hear music from nearby parties and wonder if Haley was out there, laughing with the same people who wouldn't look twice at me. I'd remind myself that her world was built on comfort, not effort. Mine was built on grit. Once, she visited me unannounced. She stood at my door wearing a designer jacket and holding a coffee she didn't finish. Her eyes wandered around the small space before she forced a smile. "You really should ask Mom and Dad for help," she said. "They just want you to be happy." I laughed under my breath. Her words weren't comfort. They were reminders of everything I didn't have. After she left, I sat by my desk and opened my notebook. I didn't write a plan. I didn't write a dream. I just wrote one line: "I'll never ask them again." That night, while she probably danced under string lights at some sorority event, I stacked books until dawn. My hands ached, but my mind was clear. I didn't envy her life anymore. I was building something different, something real. And though no one could see it yet, I knew the day would come when every hour I'd spent in that cold apartment would mean something. The tuition deadline was only 3 days away, and no matter how I calculated it, I was short. I had sold my old laptop, skipped meals, and taken extra shifts, but the number on the screen didn't move enough. I told myself I wouldn't ask them for help again. I had promised that after the last time. But that night, sitting in my cold apartment with bills scattered across the table, I broke my own rule. I dialed home. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from exhaustion. When my mother picked up, her voice was calm and distant, like I was a stranger calling from a wrong number. I explained my situation, choosing every word carefully. I didn't ask for much, just enough to cover what I couldn't. There was silence for a few seconds, then a faint sigh. Her words came out soft, almost casual. "Haley deserved it. But you didn't." At first, I thought I heard her wrong. But she didn't take it back. She didn't even sound angry or sorry. It was as if she was explaining the weather, simple, unchangeable, out of my control. I sat there, frozen, with the phone pressed to my ear, hearing the clinking of dishes in the background, like my words had never mattered. Then she said she had to go and hung up. The room went silent. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stared at my reflection in the window. Tired eyes, worn hands, messy hair. I realized something. I had been fighting for her approval more than for my own peace. That moment killed that habit. I stood up, walked to the mirror, and looked at myself properly for the first time in years. My reflection didn't look weak. It looked determined. That sentence, those 5 words, had done what no amount of pain or neglect could do. It had cut the last thread tying me to the hope that one day they'd treat me like family. From that moment, something hardened inside me. I stopped being the daughter who waited for fairness and became someone who created her own way forward. The need for their love turned into fuel. I didn't need to prove I was worthy of it anymore. I needed to prove I could live without it. The next morning, I went to campus early and asked my professor if there were any extra hours available at the library. He said yes, surprised by my persistence. I worked double shifts that week. I was exhausted, but every minute felt lighter than that phone call. At least this exhaustion was mine. When I received my next paycheck, I made the payment myself. The confirmation email popped up on my screen, and a strange calm washed over me. I had done it. Without their help, without their care, without their permission. That night, I didn't think about Haley's world or my parents' approval. I thought about the woman I was becoming, quiet, steady, unbreakable. The call that was supposed to destroy me had, instead, built the version of me they'd never see coming. Professor Albright was the kind of teacher most students tried to avoid. He rarely smiled, never accepted late work, and his lectures were packed with numbers and theories that made half the class zone out. But I liked his honesty. He didn't waste words or pretend to care about excuses. If you worked hard, he noticed. If you didn't, he didn't bother remembering your name. I always sat in the front row, not because I wanted attention, but because I couldn't afford to miss a single thing. After long nights at the library, I'd drag myself into his class with coffee-stained notes and heavy eyes. Still, I took everything in. Numbers made sense to me in a way people never did. They followed rules, they added up, and they never lied. One afternoon after class, he asked me to stay back. My stomach dropped. I thought maybe I had made a mistake on my last assignment. Instead, he held up my project and said, "Did you really do all these calculations by hand?" I nodded, unsure of what he was getting at. "Most students would have taken shortcuts," he said quietly. "You didn't." That was the start of something I didn't see coming. A few days later, he offered me a research assistant position for his upcoming paper. The pay wasn't much, but to me, it felt like the world had finally noticed I existed. It wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was trust earned through effort. Working with him changed how I saw myself. He never gave compliments, but the respect in the way he spoke to me said enough. When I made a good point, he listened. When I made a mistake, he corrected me without judgment. I realized that was what real support looked like: quiet, steady, and fair. The research hours were long, but I didn't mind. I spent evenings sorting through data and weekends typing reports. Every task he gave me felt like proof that I was capable of more than surviving. One day, when we were reviewing figures, he looked over his glasses and said, "You have a discipline most people twice your age don't have. Don't lose it." It wasn't a compliment. It was a statement, and it meant more than any praise I'd ever gotten from my family. I didn't tell him much about my personal life, but I think he sensed there was more behind my determination. He never asked, and I was grateful for that. His way of helping me wasn't through questions. It was through opportunity. And for the first time, I wasn't being seen as someone struggling, but as someone worth investing in. By the end of the semester, I had learned more than just accounting. I had learned what it felt like to be valued for effort, not bloodline. When I turned in my final report, he said, "Good work, Sienna." 2 simple words, but from him, they carried weight. As I left his office that day, I realized something important. I didn't need my parents' approval to feel proud anymore. Someone had finally recognized my worth, and it had nothing to do with family names or favoritism. It came from what I had built on my own. The email arrived on a gray morning when I was barely awake. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another campus announcement or reminder about library fees. But the subject line made me stop. Nomination confirmation, Harrison Grant. For a second, I thought it was a mistake. I hadn't applied for anything like that. I clicked it open, my hands shaking slightly. It said I had been nominated by Professor Albright for the National Harrison Grant, an award for students who paid their own tuition through work and achievement. I read the message 3 times before it sank in. Me? Nominated? I hadn't even known he noticed my work that much. I looked around my small apartment, the walls filled with sticky notes and half-finished reports, and felt something strange stir inside me: hope. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, almost cautious, like a candle finally catching fire. The next day, I went to see Professor Albright. He was at his desk, as usual, surrounded by stacks of papers. I asked him if he had really sent the nomination. He didn't look up when he said, "You've earned it. Now make sure they see why." That was it. No speech, no smile, just that simple sentence. But it meant more than any praise I'd ever received. The application process was intense. Essays, financial records, proof of employment, recommendation letters. It felt endless. I spent nights at my desk, typing until my eyes burned. Every line I wrote was personal. I didn't just describe my grades or projects. I wrote about the nights I stayed awake balancing work and studies, about the lessons I learned from struggle, and about what independence had taught me. It wasn't just an application. It was my story in clean, professional words. There were moments when doubt tried to creep in. What if I wasn't good enough? What if someone else had a more impressive background or better connections? But every time that thought appeared, I remembered my mother's voice saying I didn't deserve help. That memory didn't hurt anymore. It pushed me forward. Weeks passed, and I barely noticed the exhaustion. My days turned into a blur of numbers, drafts, and corrections. Sometimes I'd fall asleep at my desk and wake up to the sound of my alarm, realizing I hadn't even eaten. Still, I kept going. This wasn't just about money. It was about breaking free completely. When I finally hit submit, I didn't celebrate. I just sat back in my chair and took a deep breath. My fingers were sore, my head was heavy, but I felt lighter than I had in years. Whatever happened next, I knew I had given it everything. I didn't tell anyone, not my classmates, not even Haley. This was mine alone. For once, my success wouldn't come with comparison or competition. It would come from my effort, my name, and my story. That night, as I looked out my window at the quiet street below, I smiled to myself. I didn't know if I would win the grant, but one thing was certain. I was no longer chasing approval. I was chasing freedom. The results for the Harrison Grant were supposed to come out on a Monday morning. I didn't expect much. I told myself not to hope too hard, but deep down, I couldn't stop checking my email every few hours. That morning, when the message finally arrived, I stared at the subject line for a long time before opening it. It said, "Congratulations, Sienna. You've been selected as a recipient of the Harrison Grant." For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. I read the line again, then again, until it finally felt real. I had done it. I had won one of the most competitive scholarships in the country, something only a handful of students achieved each year. It wasn't just about the money. It was the recognition, the proof that everything I had worked for mattered. All those late nights, all that silence, finally meant something. When I told Professor Albright, he simply nodded. "I knew you would," he said, then went back to grading papers as if it was the most ordinary thing in the world. That was his way, no big reaction, just quiet pride. And somehow, that calm response made it feel even more special. Later that day, I decided to call home. I don't know why. Maybe a small part of me still wanted them to be proud, even after everything. My mother answered, her tone flat as always. I told her about the grant, how it covered full tuition, provided a research stipend, and opened doors for future positions. There was a long pause. Then she said, "That's nice, dear." Before I could respond, she added, "Oh, by the way, Haley got invited to a leadership dinner at her sorority. Isn't that wonderful?" Her words felt like a cold wave washing over the warmth I had just felt. I didn't argue or try to explain how important this was. I just said, "That's great for her," and ended the call. The silence afterward was louder than her dismissal. I sat there for a while, staring at my phone, realizing that I had been waiting for something they were never going to give me. Their pride was selective, their affection conditional. It had taken me years to see it clearly, but that phone call made it final. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. I made a small dinner, cleaned my desk, and printed the email with the scholarship notice. I taped it to the wall above my study table. A reminder, not of what they denied me, but of what I had earned without them. As days passed, congratulatory messages poured in from professors and classmates. People I barely knew stopped me in hallways to say they'd read about me in the university newsletter. Each kind word felt like sunlight breaking through after years of cold. I didn't tell my family about the ceremony. They wouldn't have understood what it meant anyway. Their opinion no longer shaped my joy. For the first time, their silence didn't sting. It just confirmed what I already knew. I didn't need their validation. I had something stronger, proof that I could rise, even when they never thought I would. The invitation email for the Harrison Grant ceremony came a week after the announcement. It was formal and elegant, written in gold and navy letters. Recipients were allowed to bring their families to celebrate the achievement. I stared at that line for a long time. I didn't know my family anything, but something inside me wanted them to see what I had become without their help. I drafted a short message to my parents and sister. I didn't mention it was a national award or that only a few students were chosen from thousands. I called it a small university recognition event. I wanted them curious but unprepared, to walk in expecting something simple and leave realizing how wrong they'd been about me. After hitting send, I sat back and looked around my small apartment. It was quiet but peaceful, the kind of peace that used to scare me but now felt like strength. I'd earned this silence, just like I'd earned that scholarship. In the following days, I focused on getting ready. I bought a new outfit, a deep blue dress that looked both professional and elegant. It wasn't flashy, but it felt powerful. I curled my hair and practiced my speech in front of the mirror every night. My words weren't about my struggles or my pain. They were about resilience, about learning to believe in myself when no one else did. The morning of the ceremony arrived bright and cold. I woke before dawn, nerves twisting in my stomach. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and reviewed the program again. There would be journalists, donors, and professors from universities across the country. The thought of standing in front of all those people should have scared me, but it didn't. I felt ready, like every hardship had been training for this exact moment. My phone buzzed around noon. It was my mother. Her message was short. "We'll try to come if we're not busy." I didn't bother replying. I'd stopped expecting effort from them a long time ago. When I arrived at the university hall, the place looked magical. The banners, the cameras, the proud families, it all felt surreal. I found my seat near the front, surrounded by other recipients and their smiling parents. I noticed how many hugs and happy tears filled the room. It stung a little, but I refused to let it show. Minutes before the ceremony started, I saw them, my parents and Haley, walking in. They looked around, confused, probably expecting a small gathering. When they realized it was a major event with reporters and awards, their expressions shifted. My father's face tightened, my mother's lips pressed together, and Haley just stared. I smiled politely and turned back to the stage. In that moment, I wasn't nervous anymore. I felt calm, focused, almost detached. It wasn't revenge I wanted, it was closure. I wanted them to see, with their own eyes, the person they had underestimated. The girl they once ignored was now someone the entire room was here to honor. As the lights dimmed and the first speaker took the stage, I straightened my shoulders. This wasn't their story anymore, it was mine, and I was ready to own every word of it. The ceremony hall was full, every seat taken, the air buzzing with quiet excitement. Cameras flashed as names were called one by one, students walking up proudly to receive their awards. My family sat in the middle rows, dressed neatly, pretending to fit in. My mother's polite smile looked forced, my father's posture stiff, and Haley scrolled on her phone as if she was doing me a favor by showing up. I sat near the front with the other recipients, listening as the host introduced each awardee. The words were warm, respectful, full of admiration. My hands trembled slightly in my lap, not from fear, but from the pressure of the moment. I'd worked so long for this. Every long night, every sacrifice, it had all led here. When the announcer began speaking about the next recipient, I recognized the story immediately. "This student worked nights to fund her education," the host said. Never missing a deadline, never asking for sympathy. She balanced multiple jobs and still maintained top grades. Her journey is a reminder that resilience, not privilege, defines success. Then came the final line. "Please welcome winner of the Harrison Grant, Sienna Reed." The applause hit like thunder. I stood slowly, my legs steady, my heart quiet. As I walked to the stage, I noticed something shift in the audience. Heads turned toward my family. It wasn't intentional, just a natural reaction after hearing about a student who achieved everything on her own. I caught sight of my mother's face. Her smile had vanished. My father's jaw clenched, and Haley's phone hung forgotten in her hand. For the first time, they looked uncomfortable, not out of embarrassment for me, but because they realized everyone around them knew the truth. The announcer continued, "Sienna's accomplishments stand out not only because of her academic excellence, but because she did it all without any financial support from family. Every tuition payment, every book, every meal, earned by her own hands." The words echoed through the hall, steady and clear. My steps didn't falter. I walked up, shook the dean's hand, and accepted the award. The camera light flashed, capturing the moment forever. The audience rose in applause, and I felt the sound wash over me, not as noise, but as validation. From the stage, I could see them more clearly. My mother's face had gone pale, her eyes darting to the people whispering beside her. My father tried to keep his composure, adjusting his tie, avoiding eye contact. Haley sat frozen, expression unreadable. For years, they had controlled the story, painting me as the difficult one, the ungrateful one. But now, in front of hundreds of people, the truth had spoken louder than they ever could. I didn't smirk. I didn't look for revenge. I simply smiled, a calm, collected smile that said everything words couldn't. The applause lasted longer than I expected, but I didn't rush to leave the stage. I wanted them to feel it, the weight of what they'd ignored, the success they could never claim credit for. When I returned to my seat, my professor gave me a small nod of pride. For the first time in my life, I felt completely seen. The crowd still clapped, but for me, the real sound was silence. The silence coming from the three people who once thought I'd never make it without them. The ceremony ended with cheers and handshakes, and I could finally breathe. My name still echoed in my head, not because of pride, but because it finally felt real. I stood by the exit, holding the award plaque against my chest. The crowd slowly thinned, but my family lingered behind, hesitant, as if waiting for the right moment to rewrite what had just happened. My mother reached me first. Her voice trembled, trying to sound casual. "We didn't know, Sienna. You never told us it was this serious." Her smile was weak, her eyes darting to the people nearby, still whispering about the speech. My father stood beside her, straightening his jacket like that could fix the tension. Haley trailed a few steps behind, her expression unreadable, half guilt, half wounded pride. I looked at them, calm and steady. There was no anger left in me. That part had burned out long ago. "You told me I didn't deserve your help," I said quietly, meeting my mother's eyes. "You were right. I didn't deserve pity or money. I deserved to earn it on my own." They didn't respond right away. My father opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Haley looked down, as if suddenly realizing how much she'd taken for granted. The silence between us was heavy, filled with all the things they'd never said and I no longer needed to hear. Then, out of nowhere, a man in a Navy suit approached. He introduced himself as a senior recruiter from an accounting firm I'd only ever dreamed of working for. "Ms. Reed, I was deeply impressed by your story," he said, shaking my hand. "We'd love to have you join our New York team after graduation." I blinked, stunned for a second. "Are you serious?" I asked, half laughing from disbelief. "Very," he replied with a smile. "Your perseverance and skill are exactly what we're looking for. I'll have my assistant reach out with details tomorrow." I thanked him, and he left, leaving behind a stunned silence. My mother's mouth opened slightly, my father's shoulders stiffened, and Haley's eyes widened. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. They stood there, watching as people congratulated me, some asking for photos, others shaking my hand. The same parents who once said I wasn't deserving were now seeing others praise me for the very things they dismissed. My mother finally whispered, "We're proud of you, sweetheart." It sounded more like a question than a statement. I smiled softly. "You don't have to be," I said. "I did this for me, not for approval." Haley looked at me then, her eyes wet but quiet. "I didn't realize how hard it was for you," she said softly. I nodded, not out of bitterness but closure. "That's because you didn't have to." As I walked away, I felt no need to look back. Their voices faded behind me as I stepped outside into the cool evening air. The city lights shimmered in the distance, and for the first time, my future felt completely mine. No guilt, no waiting for their validation. Just the quiet freedom of knowing I had built something they could never take away. The morning I left for New York was calm. There were no hugs, no teary goodbyes, just a quiet ride to the airport. My parents didn't call, and I didn't wait for them to. The silence between us had said everything that needed to be said. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done carrying the weight of their approval. When the plane touched down, The city stretched out before me like a promise. My apartment was small, barely furnished, but it was mine. Every bill paid, every piece of furniture bought with money I earned. No strings, no guilt. I stood by the window that night, watching the lights flicker across the skyline, and realized that peace doesn't always come with celebration. It comes with freedom. I thought about them sometimes. My parents, sitting in their quiet house, probably seeing my name in articles or hearing my firm's success stories. Maybe they felt regret. Maybe they didn't. Either way, it didn't matter. My life was no longer tied to their choices. I built new connections, found mentors who valued effort over image, and surrounded myself with people who celebrated success without envy. For once, I wasn't the forgotten daughter working in the shadows. I was the woman who refused to stay small. There was no dramatic confrontation, no need for revenge fueled by anger. My victory was in the quiet, the kind that doesn't demand attention but still shines where it matters. Every step I took, every achievement I earned, was a reminder that I didn't need to prove anything to them anymore. One evening, as I watched the sunset paint the city gold, I smiled to myself. They might never say it out loud, but I knew they saw me now, even if only from afar. That was enough. Revenge doesn't always come in loud, fiery moments. Sometimes it's just walking away and building something beautiful from the ruins others left behind. My success wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could rise without anyone's permission. If you've ever had to earn your worth in silence, I want you to remember this. Living well isn't just survival. It's the sweetest form of revenge. Do you think I was right to walk away and build my life alone? Or should I have forgiven them and tried again? Tell me your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like mine.